All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and get this started so we can get to your questions as soon as possible. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. My name is Emma Stocker. I'm the Director of Emergency Management at Portland State and one of the facilitators of the campus incident management team. Today, I'll be facilitating this question and answer session. Portland State is located in the heart of Portland, Oregon, in Multnomah County. It is very important that we honor the indigenous peoples, traditional and ancestral homelands we stand on. The Multnomah, Calumet, Clackamas, Tumwater, Watlala bands of the Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, and many other indigenous nations of the Columbia River, or wherever you are today. We must acknowledge the ancestors of this place and recognize that we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. In remembering these communities, we honor their legacies, their lives, and their descendants. In May of this year, we hosted a webinar with presentations from several campus leaders on the topic of return to campus. They had policy updates, information about physical improvements, human resources, guides, and more. We were not able to get to all the questions that were asked during that webinar in real time. The Q&A and the recording of that webinar are now posted online, so you can go and review that for more of a presentation on this material and looking back at the specific questions and answers asked during that webinar. We hope that today's webinar provides you additional information you need to feel more comfortable with returning to work on campus. And just as a reminder, this webinar is geared toward an employee audience, so questions about teaching and learning on campus will be addressed in different forums. This will be the last time you hear about this topic. We've got several more webinars planned over the course of the summer and other targeted email communications over the coming months as well. Today, our panel of campus leaders are here to answer your questions. We have the live Q&A feature enabled in the Zoom webinar. You'll see that button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You're also welcome to email questions at any time during this webinar or tomorrow if you remember a question, or next week. Send that email to coronavirusresponse@pdx.edu, and that email is there on the screen that you're seeing. You'll also notice at the bottom of your Zoom screen a button for live transcripts, if that would be helpful for you. We are recording this webinar and it will be available for viewing later on the Coronavirus Response website. Our panelists today are some familiar faces from the earlier webinar in May, and some new faces as well to get to some of the questions that we weren't able to answer live last time. So today we have Brian Roy, the Associate Vice President of Risk Management and Contracting, Nathan Klinkhammer, the Associate Vice President, Human Resources, Carrie Morris, Assistant Director with Facilities and Property Management, Heather Goa, Director of Administrative Services at the Center for Student Health and Counseling, Ian Studi, Director of Transportation and Parking Services, and Jason Franklin, Interim Associate Vice President, Planning, Construction, and Real Estate. So we will be able to cover a lot of different topics with you today. We don't have a presentation planned. We really want to get to your questions and start having getting you the information that you're interested in, and we'll let your questions guide our conversation. So I'll start with some of the questions that you submitted when you registered for this webinar. The first question is for Carrie and/or Jason Franklin. The first question is, please explain what PSU is doing to assess whether or not the rate of air exchange is sufficient and as safe as possible in all spaces. Will PSU be providing portable air filters and the supplies to continue to run those, like replacement filters to be changed out? Carrie and/or Jason, can you speak to that one, please?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So just a little history of where we're currently at is we, right at the beginning of the pandemic, started working with Dean Richard Corsi with the College of Engineering, who has really become a good resource for a lot of campus communities on how to handle air exchanges and indoor air quality. And we started right from the beginning on the measures that we have taken, and those include programming our system throughout the campus to optimize our outside air, which just basically means that to the largest extent that we can, we're bringing in outside air to facilitate air exchanges within our spaces. In addition to that, we, on all the buildings that will accommodate MERV 13 filters, we have installed MERV 13 filters and are continuing to maintain those filters through this event. And then in addition to that, we also have implemented building purges where prior to occupancy of buildings, we will run the system fully purging the building and all the air in that building at the beginning of each day. These recommendations fall in line also with the recommendations that OSHA has now put out and ASHRAE for indoor air quality when it comes to COVID-19. Our systems throughout campus are not perfect. There are buildings and systems that won't, that do better than others on these measures. So if you do have a concern with your particular space that you occupy or building that you work in, you can still contact EH&S for any additional concerns that you have and maybe any additional evaluation of your space, and they're prepared to be able to do air monitoring and other things to confirm that all of our spaces are safe to occupy.
Thanks, Terry. The second part of the question is about portable air filters. Jason, are you able to speak to that topic a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Emma. Okay. Yeah, we have deployed a number of portable HEPA filters across campus in places that meet the criteria for the HEPA filters, which is generally classrooms under 1,200 square feet and areas in office suites that are under 1,000 square feet and that have 3 or more folks occupying that area on a consistent basis. So, and we are able to deploy more of those filters. There is a request form that you'll find on the coronavirus response website, and I can drop a link in the chat as well. There's a form for supplies that you can request, and there's a link in there to the HEPA filters. And so for areas where PSU supplies the HEPA filter, we will also maintain that HEPA filter as well.
One thing I might just add to my response, Emma, is on the EH&S homepage, there is a link that is PSU Building COVID-19 Summary, Building Summary Profile. And anybody can go to that and find out if your building has MERV 13 filters and what other measures that we're doing for that particular building.
Great, thanks very much. Another question that was submitted during the registration is for Nathan and is on the topic of human resources topic. The question is, if a staff member would like to continue working remotely, what is the process for making this happen?
Yeah, hi everybody, and thanks, Emma. And I guess this is a hot topic, right? We have posted a lot of web resources out there. I hope that folks here have been able to look at some of our Return to Campus Guide materials. And a lot of the stuff that is out there and our upcoming FAQs are directly as a response from feedback and conversations we've had with PSU employees. So I just wanted to say thanks for that right up front. As far as continuing working from home or remote work, that starts with conversation with your supervisor. I would say, we have a lot of these questions on our website, so you can see them there as well. But discuss how the existing process has worked. Discuss how maybe the delivery of services may change in a situation where there are more folks on campus and how that could be accommodated. And understand that supervisors are balancing a lot of priorities in their return to campus plans. And I would say that we don't have a special process just for return to campus, but we have done a lot of work with our return to work guidelines. And if you search on the website for return to work guidelines, they'll be there, but I'll drop a link in the chat here in just a moment. The website for return to campus guidelines has been rewritten, although the underlying policy has not changed. We have modernized a lot of the language. There's no more references to fax machines, which was in there before, and a lot of additional language is in there as well. We also converted the form, the application process for that used to be it was a PDF, but it was essentially a paper kind of form. And that is now goes through OnBase. It'll actually pre-fill a lot of the information for you automatically. It'll pre-fill your supervisor information automatically and really lets you, really streamlines that process to getting it routed through to your supervisor. Take a look at that. We think that's a good step forward. The website will also be updated in the near future due to the new AAUP CBA. Two things that I would say that have been updated in there for AAUP employees would be that through the end of the year, the notification period for remote work needs to be at least 3 weeks. And I would say that although that's specific to AAUP, we would recommend for all employees that these conversations should be happening now, that remote work agreements should really start to be in place and start to be filed probably around August to make sure that they're in there well in advance. I think nobody needs any surprises coming to the fall. People are trying to plan their lives. It's important for those conversations to happen as far in advance as possible. We do anticipate that the remote work guidelines will be used more frequently. So although the policy itself has not changed, we have been really keeping an eye towards transparency and visibility to make it easier for people to access. And I will drop that link in the chat right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Nathan. The next question I have is also from one that was submitted originally during registration. And Ian, this one's for you. It's about parking. This person says to us, I would like to know what the university's plans are for parking. I did not drive to campus pre-COVID, but when I return to campus in late August, I intend to drive and park every day for at least fall term, if not longer. What are PSU's plans? What will most likely be a large increase in parking on campus and offsetting costs, maybe via more parking lots, reduced rate, or part-time options? Ian, can you elaborate a little bit on what your office has been working on?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks very much. This is a great question. I know a lot of folks are feeling some concern about what it's going to be like to commute back to campus again. And our office has been hard at work to try and provide some additional options for folks to meet their new needs. In particular, for faculty and staff, we have rolled out a part-time permit that allows them to match a schedule if they plan to be on campus 3 days a week. They can simply pay for those 3 days as a part of their permit. They will need to pick those days in advance, so a regular schedule. But folks can adapt that up to 3 times, or I'm sorry, yes, 3 times throughout the year to match with the term schedule. So for example, for faculty, if they need to change their schedules each quarter, which is, can happen. So we are rolling out some additional options for parking. I want to mention though that our policy remains the same. We do not sell out of parking for faculty and staff. We always retain the ability to provide space for faculty and staff to reach campus by car if they need to. We will continue to promote transit use, and we are working closely with TriMet on that. We have faculty and staff who've already returned to using TriMet. And we will have some messaging as we get closer to the return to campus to let folks know about the latest information about using transit, availability of transit, the service levels, and of course, the safety of using transit. So we'll expect to see more from us soon about that. In regards to, overall, paid parking will remain a constant for us. It's an important part of supporting the system of providing parking and having the garages there and the staff that are needed. But we are looking again to make options that are as flexible as possible for people. We do anticipate some increase in demand, but we're also anticipating that folks will be on campus less because of this kind of new normal of remote work and some portion of remote work remaining in place. As Nathan mentioned, we anticipate that more people will be maintaining some level of remote work and utilizing the remote work policy that we have. So we're hoping that that also will help smooth out demand. Lastly, I will say that we are preparing to send a survey to employees soon. So we will have some more data very soon, and we'll again be using that to adapt our plan for September.
Thank you, Ian. Brian, I have the next question for you, which is about the vaccine. And if this person asks, if you are waiting for a vaccine to be FDA approved, is there anything special you need to do now or when returning to campus?
Good question. Yeah. So we recognize that some people are uncomfortable getting the vaccine until it's been fully authorized by the FDA. And that's why we created a temporary deferral for those people for compliance with our vaccine mandate. But our expectation is we're going to set up campus that it's safe for all, for vaccinated and unvaccinated. Now, the single most effective means of preventing transmission of COVID is to be vaccinated. It is incredibly effective. And not only at contracting the virus, but if the very unlikely chance you do, at mitigating significant adverse outcomes. So we highly encourage everyone to get the vaccine. But for those that are waiting until full FDA authorization, one can expect there might be measures or recommendations that apply to those unvaccinated that don't apply to vaccinated. For instance, right now, CDC and OHA have different guidance with respect to mask wearing for those that are vaccinated and unvaccinated. I think that those are possibilities that we'll see as we come into fall, and potentially other measures. But for the most part, campus needs to be safe for all, that regardless of vaccination status. And we anticipate a regime of recommendations that will take that into account. Again, encouraging as many people as possible to be vaccinated. Not only protects you, it protects the community at large.
Thanks, Brian. We have a couple more questions about vaccine and vaccination. So specifically, Heather, I believe this question would be for you. Does the vaccine requirement apply to those participating in the Summer Bridge Scholars Program?
No, the requirement will not apply to the Summer Bridge program. The policy takes effect September 1st, but really will be applied starting in fall.
For fall term. Mm-hmm. And this is a question that's just come in by the chat, and it's related to these two topics that we're on right now. So I want to go ahead and ask it of the panelists. How will the vaccine process be different for students and staff? Students have been asking if there's a timeline and process when they'll be uploading their vaccination card. Brian or Heather, would one of you speak to the process that a student might expect and an employee might expect?
Right, so for students, we will not be asking for a card upload. It will just be an attestation that they have completed a vaccine series. And there are some other options in there as far as exemptions and deferrals. And our hope would be that starting in mid-July, students can submit that information. So.
Yeah, and the process will be fairly similar for employees. It'll be managed a little differently. That'll be managed by HR, Human Resources, rather than SHAC for students. And the timeline for that system to go live is the same. Once we get closer to the moment which we're going to turn on the portal that you'd enter that information, we'll have a lot more information about exactly how to go about completing the information into satisfying the mandate, what exceptions are available, the FDA deferral. All of that will be spelled out in more detail as we get closer to the go live for that portal.
Great. So this next question is sort of in the middle of the Venn diagram between Human Resources and the vaccine program. And Nathan, I believe it's for you. What is the policy if an employee cannot take the vaccine and requests to work from home for fall term?
So I think it's hard to answer some of these questions in a generic sense because they are so specific to an individual's position, to the approach that the area is taking. But with that said, these can be two separate types of issues. So the mandatory vaccination program does include exemptions for medical and religious beliefs. And so for some folks, that may be a valid option for them to pursue. For other folks, there may be other underlying concerns and conditions, and we do have an ADA accommodations process. I would recommend that if you think that you have that type of a medical need, that you may look at some of those programs on our website and see whether you believe that you would qualify under those, and then contact us through the information available on the website there. But again, this is very individual, and so it is hard to kind of concretely answer for everybody in this sort of a venue. I'd be glad to hear from you if people have specific questions.
Great. So I want to take us back to the physical environment for a moment. And we've had a couple questions in the chat, and we had a couple questions in the originally submitted questions about capacity of spaces and individual offices. So this might be a question for Jason Franklin or Brian Roy for you. Could you talk about capacity of spaces, whether that's individual offices, clusters of offices, or elevators? I know was a question we had in the chat just now.
Yeah, and I think Brian answered one of the questions just regarding office space and shared office space. And right now the requirements are for still remain physical distance. So if that can't be met within an office, then you need to make sure that as a supervisor, you're scheduling employees appropriately. Right now, the requirements are still that we have 2 folks in per elevator. Again, as things change as we move towards fall, those restrictions are likely to loosen, and as they loosen, we'll be making updates to signage across campus. So, and that also goes for things like break rooms and conference rooms and things like that. So right now we're fully anticipating that many of those restrictions will loosen or will go away completely, and we will be removing or re-signing as appropriate and as necessary across campus.
Thank you, Jason. And related to occupancy, we've got a question in the Q&A, and also we had a couple come in during registration about buildings remaining locked and access to the public. Jason or Brian, could you speak to building access now and in the fall?
Sure, I'll take that one. So since, oh goodness, last spring, we've changed our access to buildings significantly. So now it's required for access to any building that it's via your PSU ID through our electronic access control system. We're still determining the best approach for access in our buildings for fall. I think, there are reasons to stay the way we are, to stay very restrictive. There's reasons why we need to be a bit more flexible and for access. And it's something we're working with our campus partners. We're working with the provost and the deans and department heads across the university to find out, to get feedback on what the best approach to access will be for the fall. And we'll make sure to communicate that going forward.
Thank you. We have several questions in the chat right now about proof of vaccination and knowing if people are vaccinated, whether that's a community member or somebody who might be visiting campus for a meeting. Heather, or maybe Brian, I'm wondering if you can chat a little bit about how will our community members know who is vaccinated, or if we will know who is vaccinated, how we talk about that, and how that process works.
So as a general principle, people's vaccination status will not be known. There are significant privacy issues at play there, and health information issues. You will not know, just as when you go to the grocery store or you go to any establishment, any public place, you don't know. The individual next to you may or may not be vaccinated. Again, the goal here is to create an environment that's safe for everyone. We still recommend as many people as possible get vaccinated. If you are vaccinated, your risk for contracting the illness is very, very small. And so it's incumbent upon people to get vaccinated, as many people as possible, and that will reduce their risk profile, regardless of the person next to them status. But we ask that people do not confront others about their vaccination status on campus. Obviously, conversations happen. It's not to say that this topic can never be broached, but we want people to feel comfortable regardless of their vaccination status on campus.
Great, thank you. A question, I think possibly for Jason, as well as possibly for Brian, about campus-related services and about our campus district. Our campus-related services, restaurants, bookstores, etc., following policies similar to the university. You know, we're not just in our office building or just in a classroom, but we're interacting with lots of different campus services in our buildings and in the university district.
Right. So for our retail spaces, we cannot require that our retail tenants get vaccinated or require folks to be vaccinated. We are certainly encouraging that. And as Brian said, getting the message out that this is the best defense against transmission. And so again, like any place that you go in your neighborhood or downtown, there will be those businesses will have their policies, and as those change throughout the summer and towards fall, we're all kind of adapting to that as we move forward through this process. So we're working with our lease tenants and our other partners on campus regarding vaccinations, as well as ongoing policies for social distancing and masking, as those are currently in place.
I have a logistical question, and I'm not sure who this one, who the best person to answer this is, but we have a question in the chat right now that the expiration on my PSU ID was 1 year ago. Can I still access buildings when it comes time to get back to campus?
Yes, I'll take a stab at that. I believe that is should not be a problem. And as long as you haven't had a other change in your work status, your access should still be valid for those places where you had access previously, regardless of the sticker has expired. So that's that's a way I believe that works, and we'll have to just double check with access control, Emma, on that one.
Thank you. So here's a question about the general public health outlook. If cases rise again, if we see another surge, if variants come through, right? If cases rise again in the fall, will there be a return to remote work and learning? I think, Brian, I might have tagged you for that one. Heather, you might have some insight on that as well.
Emma, could you repeat it? I was having some tech difficulties.
Oh, yeah, not a problem. So the question is about general public health outlook. If cases rise again in the fall because of a surge, it could be variant related, who knows why, will there be a return to remote work and learning?
Sure. So, with the caveat that we don't know anything with certainty, we are optimistic that won't be necessary. This is not just internally optimistic. This is based on discussions we have with the Oregon Health Authority, Multnomah County Health Department, and just the general information available on the virus and the vaccination rates. So if we're close to 70% in the state, very close, and significantly above that in Multnomah County and the metro area, we feel like we're pretty well protected against significant surges. I would expect across the country in various pockets, there may be surges, but I think it'll be more community-based rather than sort of significant statewide based that we've seen during this pandemic. All that said, should public health dictate that we need to pull back, we will pull back. We will do so in coordination with Oregon Health Authority, with the governor's office, with Multnomah County Health Department. We're prepared to do that. It won't be a smooth process because it's impossible to make it a smooth process. We'll do the best we can, but we're prepared to do that should the situation arise. Again, we don't expect that to happen, but we have to plan for all contingencies.
We've had some folks in the chat providing helpful information related to a prior question about the IDs expiring. And I'm going to go with our SS Control manager, Mike McNerney's response. Card expirations have been extended until January 31st, 2020 to allow time for employees to replace cards at their convenience after returning to campus. Thank you very much, Mike, for chiming in. You might get roped into the next webinar, so stay tuned on that. We've had a couple of questions I'm seeing in the Q&A about contact tracing and what that is going to look like when folks are coming back, and notification around if there are cases on campus. And I can start to answer that one by saying that we do have a COVID-19 dashboard on the website, and you can see what the campus cases that have been connected to campus in some way, what those numbers are from the beginning. And we've had many weeks now of 0 and pretty low case counts, I think, considering all along. So that's a place to get information about campus right now. There's also information there about testing, that the availability of testing at SHAC, and you can see that live. So contact tracing, if somebody receives a positive COVID test, we are asking that they do not come to campus and that they contact SHAC to initiate the contact tracing process. SHAC has been able to do that for campus, not just students, but also employees all along. And basically they're asking questions. I think we're all pretty familiar with this now, asking questions about where you've been in the past handful of days, who you've been in contact with. So SHAC would continue to do that contact tracing. And there's also a requirement that we are communicating with those people who had direct contact. The implications are different now that people are vaccinated. The CDC guidelines about what happens if you are a close contact with someone, but you're vaccinated. And we are, at this time, emailing people who might have been in the same workspace of someone who tested positive for COVID. That's been pretty minimal with our campus stance right now of being primarily remote. But we have the contact tracing process and communication process already established, and I've been using that over the past several months, and that will be in place again, remain in place for the fall. This is a question for Nathan, I believe, or Brian, you've noted it as well. If employees are ready to come back full-time now, can they before September?
So yes, employees are allowed to access their space on campus. We made that change not too long ago to give employees a little more flexibility to access their space more regularly. But we want to make sure that before they do so, they make their supervisor aware. Supervisors should make sure that the spaces that they oversee can be accessed safely, that distancing can still be achieved. Employees need to make sure that they're following all requirements of being on campus, including mask wearing while indoors, unless they're unless they're by themselves in an isolated space. Again, physical distancing. But yes, that is something that can happen now and through the summer. We anticipate that people will want to start to access their space more regularly as we approach the fall term, and that's an option that's available to them.
Great. So we've had a couple of questions in the initial question set and in the Q&A today about non-campus, non-central campus work locations. This might be a question for Jason, might be a question for Brian. A few of the variations of that question have been what rules and regulations apply in those non-main campus locations. And the most recent question is about, do people have a different ability to access those non-main campus locations now, if it's not a PSU managed location?
So yeah, we have a few areas that are kind of remote. We have some office space, for instance, in Bend and Medford, primarily around the School of Social Work. And so those areas are going to be subject to their own the requirements of the landlord in the cases of those areas. So make sure if you are working somewhere remotely off of PSU campus that you're aware of what those current restrictions are. And then once you're in the office suite of the office controlled area or the area that's controlled by PSU, the same restrictions are in place as they are on campus as far as use of the office and masking and maintaining social distance, as long as those requirements still remain in place on the PSU campus. I know also earlier there was a question, I think, Emma, about School of Public Health, which is a joint OHSU PSU school. I was just talking to Vice Provost at OHSU about this yesterday, and they are still going through their requirements as they move into fall. Obviously, as a medical facility, they have stricter requirements, or will have continuing to have stricter requirements than we do. And so likely there will be ongoing conversation about, particularly with the School of Public Health, which is in the new Vanport building. But I imagine that those requirements will sync up pretty readily because there isn't any medical staff or any medical procedures happening in the Vanport building in the School of Public Health space.
Thank you. So I'll return us to some of the basics. We have a question about the mask requirement. What is our current mask requirement, and when might we be able to expect that to change?
I'll take that one. So currently, we require mask to be worn by everyone indoors, except when you can be alone in a private space. Mask wearing outside on campus is recommended for anyone who is not vaccinated. We anticipate that as early as next week, the state approach to mask wearing and just the guidance and requirements around COVID behaviors will change. I think most people are aware that the governor set a target of 70% first dose vaccination rate in the state for significant changes to be made. We're very close to that. Probably won't hit it next week. We'll see what the governor does. If things don't change next week, it probably won't be long after. Also importantly, the governor's current executive order on COVID expires next week. We don't expect that will be extended. So what does that mean? That means that we'll go from a place where the governor and OHA is telling us what we must do to providing recommendations for primarily individual behavior, what you should be doing if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. And we will update our mask guidance accordingly. I would expect that we will likely maintain our current mask guidance or something very similar through the summer. We want to give people time to gradually get comfortable with sort of the new world in which masks aren't worn all the time everywhere. And we expect that once we approach fall, things will be changed again. So we'll have more information on that once the governor makes her announcement about what exactly things will look like at PSU for the summer, and then more information as we get closer to fall.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of questions relating to safety and security on campus. One particularly about parking garages. Ian, I think you may have seen that question come in. Another question about, if there have been businesses that have closed in the campus district, are there additional measures that can be taken for safety of students and staff, particularly in the evenings? Ian, do you want to start that one related to the parking garages?
Yeah, thank you, Emma. Related to the parking locations, we have added some additional security at night, and we have been rotating that security to locations where we have seen a problem with vandalism and vehicle break-ins. It has been successful. We're continuing to refine that. And we continue to work very closely with campus public safety to provide the best level of security and safety we can in those structures. We've also increased our own parking enforcement patrols to select areas to make sure that there is a presence in those locations during the daytime as well. It is a challenging part of what we do, but we have found that we've seen some success over the last 6 months with this approach. We have one other project or two projects in the works that are actually bringing security gates to the University Center building and also the parking structure 3. Those projects have been delayed, unfortunately, but we are hoping to get those gates in as soon as possible. It may be a couple more months at least, but they are in process right now. So we will be securing a couple of locations that should help with some of the issues we've seen there as well. And then we continue to adapt as needed. So that I can speak to it from that part of the question, but I'm not so sure. Maybe others want to chime in on the overall approach into security. And then I know there was a question about how is PSU interacting with the houseless community.
Brian, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all. We don't have anyone directly from CPSO on this call. We can make sure to have somebody on the next webinar who can speak more directly to that. But
yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. I mean, in general, we're mindful of that on campus, and we continue to work with services through the city and county to be able to help address that and be able to address the needs of those people. And as the issue has become more prominent during the last year plus from COVID, and so there's no question that's had an impact on campus as well. And Chief Willie Halburton is intimately involved in this, coordinating with city services, with the city, with the county, with ODOT, with Portland Police. It's a coordinated effort, and I think maybe we could have someone from CPSO, maybe Willie, on one of these in the future to talk more detailed about this issue.
Thank you. Nathan, I have what I think is a question for you, and it is about employees if they're working in 2 locations, essentially on campus and also working from home or working remotely, about access to resources, supplies, equipment, and paying for the setup and maintenance of essentially 2 office sites. Can you speak a little bit about some of the resources that are available around that topic?
I can, and I did respond to an email, to one of the questions a little bit earlier with some of that. There is no central resource for this, which I think a lot of people know just from moving to remote work in the first place. How this is handled is probably going to be up in large part to specific areas. However, It is an important part of working remotely is ensuring that there is accessibility and kind of transparency in how that happens. And so that should be part of the remote work conversation. If employees are choosing to work off-site, I think that it is the responsibility of PSU to ensure that there is a work location where that person can work. But again, every situation is individual, and this will be something that is handled at the department level.
Great, thank you. So we're getting close to the end of our time for this Q&A session. I want to remind folks that even if we didn't get to your question here today, you have a couple options. One is we're going to take all the questions and all the responses that we've typed out in the Q&A feature, all the questions that we've answered live, and provide that documentation. You'll be able to download a list of the Q&A, the back and forth, from the main coronavirus response website. A recording of this will be available to you as well. You can watch it again if you'd like to, or share it with other folks. And as a reminder, the webinar from May is also available online, as well as the Q&A there as well. The coronavirus response at pdx.edu email address, you can email at any time with questions on these topics or other coronavirus return to campus, human resources, human resources questions. If you've got specific case situations, specific unique situations to yourself or your workplace, do direct those to human resources, but we can help direct you from the coronavirus response email box. I would ask any of our panelists if there are any final closing thoughts that you want to share with the folks that are watching this webinar, pieces that maybe have come to your mind, you wanted to make sure you mentioned today about where we are in our resources, in our planning, in our return to campus for fall. Any final thoughts?
Well, I'll just say,
yeah,
I'll just say I appreciate getting the questions in this way, and I hope you do as well, getting questions answered. It's helpful for us in planning to hear from you, to hear what you're concerned about, what questions you have. It guides us in the way in which we approach not just planning, but communication about planning. So we're continuing to work on making campus accessible and safe for everyone, and with an eye towards really ramping up operations as we approach the fall term. There's going to be a lot more coming, both on the vaccine mandate and just what life on campus will look like for fall term and beyond as we get closer to that point. We're going to be having additional Q&A sessions, so we hope to hear more from you. And we have the coronavirus response email that's always available to ask questions, provide feedback. So I hope this has been informative. It's helpful, again, for us as a team when we are planning to know what are the things the PSU community is worrying about or needs information on. So thank you for your participation.
Thanks, Brian. Any other closing thoughts from our panelists today? All right. Well, thanks to everyone who logged in and everyone who might be viewing this at a later date. We appreciate you and the time you're investing in making this return to campus successful for everybody. And stay cool this weekend. Thanks, everybody.